February 1964. Sonny Liston called Muhammad Ali a pretty boy pretender who can't fight. What Ali did at midnight outside Liston's house brought 7 police cars and shocked the world. But what happened 3 weeks later in Miami made Liston wish he'd never opened his mouth. The story begins not in a boxing ring, but on the streets of a quiet Denver suburb at 2:00 in the morning, where the neighbors were about to witness something that had never been done before in the history of professional boxing. If you want to see how a 22-year-old pretender psychologically destroyed the most feared man in boxing, subscribe for more incredible true stories that changed sports forever. To understand why Muhammad Ali was sitting outside the heavyweight champion's house at 2:00 in the morning with a bus full of people and a megaphone, you need to understand what Sonny Liston represented in 1964. Sonny Liston was not just a boxer, he was a nightmare made flesh. Standing 6'1", with an 84-inch reach and fists that measured 15 inches around, the largest in boxing history, Liston had destroyed every opponent who dared challenge him. He'd knocked out Floyd Patterson in 1:26 seconds to win the championship. When they gave Patterson a rematch, Liston knocked him out even faster, in just 124 seconds. But Liston's terror extended far beyond his physical capabilities. He was a convicted felon with ties to organized crime, having served time for armed robbery and assaulting a police officer. When he walked into a room, hardened criminals looked away. When he stared at an opponent, grown men trembled. The boxing world considered Liston unbeatable. Sports Illustrated called him a nightmarish apparition. A.J. Liebling wrote that watching Liston fight was like watching a big cat play with a mouse before killing it. Even heavyweight legend Joe Louis said, "Liston is the most devastating puncher I've ever seen." Into this atmosphere of fear and intimidation walked a fast, talking kid from Louisville, Kentucky named Cassius Clay. Clay was everything Liston was not. Where Liston was brooding and menacing, Clay was bright and charming. Where Liston barely spoke to the press, Clay couldn't stop talking. Where Liston's dark presence cast a shadow over boxing, Clay bounced around like a butterfly, composing poetry and predicting rounds. The boxing establishment hated Clay's showmanship. They saw him as disrespectful, arrogant, and most of all, delusional. When Clay earned the right to challenge Liston for the title in early 1964, the oddsmakers gave him 7-1 odds against winning. Some bookmakers wouldn't even take bets on the fight, convinced it would be a massacre. But Clay had a strategy that went far beyond what would happen in the ring. He'd studied Gorgeous George, the flamboyant wrestler, and learned a crucial lesson: controversy sells tickets. The more outrageous Clay acted, the more people paid to watch, some hoping to see him win, but most hoping to see him get destroyed. So Clay launched a psychological campaign against Liston unlike anything boxing had ever witnessed. He called press conferences to read poetry mocking the champion. He showed up at Liston's training sessions uninvited, shouting insults. He dubbed Liston the Big Ugly Bear, and claimed he smelled like a bear too. "Liston is too ugly to be the world champ," Clay announced to reporters. "The world champ should be pretty like me. After I beat him, I'm going to donate him to the zoo." The boxing world was mortified. Veteran sports writers called Clay a disgrace to the sport. But they had to admit one thing: people were paying attention. The upcoming fight was becoming the most talked about sporting event in America. Liston's response to all this mockery was exactly what you'd expect from a man of his temperament. He didn't joke back. He didn't engage in verbal sparring. He simply threatened. "That pretty boy doesn't know what he's gotten himself into," Liston told reporters, his voice flat and menacing. "He's a loudmouth pretender who's going to get hurt bad. I might kill him. I might actually kill him in that ring." When asked if he was worried about Clay's speed and youth, Liston just stared at the reporter and said, "Speed don't matter when you can't breathe." But the threats didn't stop Clay. If anything, they emboldened him. Which brings us back to that red bus outside Liston's house at 2:00 in the morning. Clay had discovered where Liston lived. A nice house in a quiet Denver suburb. And he decided that the psychological warfare needed to escalate. So he rented a bright red bus, filled it with members of his entourage, and drove to Liston's house in the middle of the night. The plan was audacious, unprecedented, and completely insane. No challenger had ever shown up at the champion's house in the middle of the night to continue their feud. But Clay wasn't just any challenger. The bus pulled up outside Liston's darkened home, its engine rumbling in the quiet suburban street. Clay grabbed a megaphone and started shouting into the night, "Come on out, "You big ugly bear! I'm here! The world's prettiest fighter is here to see the world's ugliest fighter! Come out and face me, bear!" His voice echoed through the sleeping neighborhood like a battle cry. "You scared, Sonny? You hiding in there? Come on out! I'll turn you into a rug right here on your front lawn." Lights started coming on in neighboring houses. Confused residents peered out their windows to see a bus full of young black men shouting at Sonny Liston's house. In 1964 Colorado, in a predominantly white suburb, this was terrifying to many of them. Clay continued his midnight assault. "The Louisville Lip is here! The pretty boy pretender wants to see the ugly champion! Come out, Sonny! Stop hiding behind your curtains!" Inside the house, Liston was furious. He threw on some clothes and started for the door, ready to tear Clay apart with his bare hands. But his wife grabbed his arm. "Sonny, don't," she pleaded. "That's exactly what he wants. The police are already on their way." And indeed, they were. Panicked neighbors had flooded the 911 lines. Within minutes, 7 police cruisers and a canine unit surrounded the bus, their red and blue lights painting the quiet street in flashing colors. Officers approached with hands on their weapons, unsure what kind of disturbance they were responding to in this normally peaceful neighborhood. Clay, seeing the police, immediately transformed from midnight warrior to charming young athlete. He stepped off the bus with his hands visible, that megawatt smile lighting up the night. "Officers, I'm Cassius Clay, the #1 challenger for the heavyweight championship of the world," he said with perfect politeness. "I'm just here to give Mr. Liston a wake-up call. We got a fight coming up, and I wanted to make sure he's not getting too comfortable." The police were not amused. The senior officer stepped forward, clearly annoyed at being called out for what seemed like a celebrity stunt. "Son, I don't care if you're the President of the United States," the officer said sternly. "You're disturbing the peace in a residential neighborhood at 2 a.m. You and your people need to leave immediately, or you're all going to jail for disorderly conduct." Clay nodded respectfully, but as the bus prepared to leave, he couldn't resist one final psychological blow. Grabbing the megaphone one last time, he shouted toward Liston's house. "I'm coming for you, bear. 3 weeks, Miami Beach, and the whole world's gonna watch you fall." As the bus pulled away, curtains twitched in houses throughout the neighborhood. Sonny Liston's front door never opened. News of the midnight incident spread like wildfire. The next day, newspapers across the country ran headlines about the unprecedented stunt. Some called it brilliant promotion. Others called it childish and dangerous, but everyone was talking about it. The incident had exactly the effect Clay intended. It shifted the narrative from, "Can this kid survive Sonny Liston?" to, "What kind of psychological games is this crazy kid playing?" More importantly, it planted a seed of doubt in everyone's mind, including possibly Liston's own. What if this pretty boy really isn't afraid? Liston, for his part, told reporters, "That boy is crazy. He's going to get himself killed, and I'm going to be the one who does it." But something had changed in Liston's voice. The absolute certainty was gone. For the first time, there was a hint of something else. Uncertainty. Doubt. No one could be sure, but the seed Clay had planted was beginning to grow. The psychological warfare continued right up until fight night. At the weigh-in on the morning of February 25, 1964, Clay arrived wearing a jacket that read, "Bear Hunting." He was so agitated, screaming and shouting at Liston, that the boxing commission doctor measured his pulse at 120 beats per minute, more than double his normal resting rate. Many observers, including veteran sports writers, believed Clay was terrified. They thought the weigh-in performance was a cover for fear. Even his own corner had doubts. "Cassius, you got to calm down," Angelo Dundee, his trainer, told him backstage. "Save it for the ring." Clay just smiled. "Angelo, that wasn't acting. I wanted Sonny to think I'm crazy. A crazy man is more dangerous than a scared man." That night, 297 people packed into Miami Beach Convention Hall. Millions more watched on closed circuit television in theaters across America. The overwhelming majority were there to see the young loudmouth finally get what was coming to him. In Liston's corner, the champion sat with the dead-eyed stare that had intimidated every previous opponent. He'd barely trained for the fight. Why would he? This would be easier than the Patterson fights. This pretty boy would fold in the first round, maybe the second, if he was lucky. In Clay's corner, the young challenger was bouncing on his toes, loosening his shoulders, looking almost happy. Bundini Brown, his assistant trainer, leaned in and whispered, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." Clay smiled. He knew something everyone else was about to learn. The opening bell rang, and what happened next shocked the world. Clay didn't run. He didn't cower. Instead, he moved, dancing, circling, making Liston chase him while flicking out that impossibly fast jab. Pop, pop, pop. Each jab snapped Liston's head back, opening a cut under his left eye. By the end of round 1, Liston looked confused. His massive punches kept hitting air. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Round 2 was worse for the champion. Clay landed combinations that blurred with speed, then danced away before Liston could counter. The big ugly bear was being outclassed by the pretty boy pretender. In round 3, Clay opened up completely, landing at will. Liston's face was swelling, the cut under his eye was bleeding freely. For the first time in his professional career, Sonny Liston looked human. More than that, he looked beatable. By round 4, something strange happened. Clay came back to his corner complaining that his eyes were burning. Someone, possibly from Liston's corner, though it was never proven, had put something on Liston's gloves or body that was transferring to Clay's face. "I can't see," Clay shouted at Dundee. "Cut the gloves off. I can't see." Dundee refused. "This is the big one, Daddy," he said, sponging Clay's eyes frantically. "We're not quitting. Get out there and run. Just stay away from him until your eyes clear." Clay, half blind, somehow survived round 5 by using his incredible speed and instinct, dancing away from Liston's attempts to finish him. By round 6, Clay's vision had cleared, and he was angry. He unleashed a fury of punches on Liston, staggering the champion, making him miss, making him look old and slow and finished. Then came round 7. Or rather, round 7 never came. Liston sat on his stool between rounds 6 and 7. His trainer shouted instructions, but Liston just shook his head. The bell rang for round 7. Liston didn't stand up. The referee looked confused. Liston's corner looked panicked. The crowd erupted in chaos. Sonny Liston, the most feared man in boxing, the unbeatable monster who had destroyed Floyd Patterson twice in under 3 minutes total, had quit. He claimed his shoulder was injured and he couldn't continue. The pretty boy pretender had just forced the heavyweight champion of the world to surrender. Clay leaped from his corner, screaming at the press section, "I shook up the world! I shook up the world! I am the greatest! I told you I am the king of the world." The reaction was immediate and divided. Many boxing fans and sports writers were thrilled to see the new energy Clay brought to the sport. Others were suspicious, claiming the fight was fixed. How could the invincible Liston quit like that? It had to be the mob, they said. Medical examination later showed that Liston did indeed have a torn tendon in his shoulder. Whether the injury was severe enough to force him to quit, or whether he'd simply lost his will to fight against this impossible young man who refused to be intimidated, remains debated to this day. But one thing was certain. The midnight bus ride to Liston's house had been the beginning of the end for Sonny Liston's reign of terror. The day after the fight, Clay held a press conference. He announced that he was a member of the Nation of Islam and would be changing his name. Soon after, Elijah Muhammad gave him the name Muhammad Ali. The psychological warfare had worked perfectly. By refusing to show fear, by taking the fight to Liston's own doorstep in the middle of the night, Clay had planted doubt in the mind of a man who had never experienced it before. That doubt grew into uncertainty, and uncertainty became defeat. Years later, Ali reflected on those fights with Liston. "Sonny was a great fighter, a truly dangerous man. But I knew something about him that nobody else knew. I knew that deep down, he thought he was everything people said he was, ugly, stupid, a bum. And I knew that I was beautiful, intelligent, and destined for greatness. That's why I won before we ever stepped in the ring." The midnight bus incident became legend in boxing circles. The night a 22-year-old challenger showed up at the champion's house with a megaphone and 7 police cars, forever changing the relationship between fear and intimidation in professional boxing. Sonny Liston had called him a pretty boy pretender. But by the time Ali was finished with him, the whole world knew who the real pretender had been all along. The legacy of that midnight revenge extends far beyond boxing. It showed that psychological warfare could be as effective as physical training, that confidence could overcome intimidation, and that sometimes the person everyone calls a pretender turns out to be exactly who they claim to be. Ali's midnight visit to Liston's house wasn't just a stunt, it was a declaration of war against fear itself. And when the smoke cleared, only one man was left standing.